Yeah, no. He told me, the examiner told me specifically it's going to be Kohlberg. It's definitely Kohlberg this time. There's no question about that at all. No. Oh, hello. Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to P1. That was a joke, by the way. Welcome to P1 Evening 3 of our 4 sessions together in order to look at the most likely areas for examination questions. Standard, usual sort of setup. Got the screen here. My right-hand man, Omar, is there again as the P1 mentor for the evening, so he will be fielding any technical issues that you have, accompanied, of course, by our in-house technical staff, our backroom guys, just over there. So, yeah, and of course I'm here, as usual, in order to take us through the evening and to talk to you guys as much as you've got any queries, any comments, any thoughts that you want to share and you want me to muse over and give you some sort of response in relation to. So, as ever, let's just drop down the screen as we normally do to what we call the 2D mix. It's me, I'm still there in the corner. Hi. Still coming at you live, and so let's make a start for this evening. Now, I haven't seen you in a while, so I gave you a list of questions to look at and to plan and to think about how you would respond to those questions, and it will be those questions that I will be going through this evening. So we're going to be looking at, to begin with, we're going to look at question 1 from December 11, because of course that is let's put it in the middle, question 1 from December 11, because that is the case study question for tonight. We will then turn our attention to question 4 from the June 09 exam, and we will also be looking at question 4 from December 09. They're all big questions, obviously the case study is, but the other 2 questions are very important to me as well. So I actually doubt whether I will get on to question 3 from December 11, but we'll hold it in reserve. You never know how fast we will get through these issues. So, if you haven't downloaded them or you haven't had a chance to look at them, then they will be the questions I'm going through. But as ever, I will be making a slight assumption that you've had the opportunity to do that. Now, what have we been doing? Where are we going in terms of our time together? Well, we've dealt with governance, haven't we? So there's no point going backwards in relation to it. We've discussed the issues that are within governance. We've looked at some key questions which will take us through what are the most likely examinable areas. And so that was on the first evening. I said we kind of, would divide it equally. That's not wholly true. I mean, I think there was a good sense of governance that rolled over to the second evening in terms of internal control. But we did talk about the tips for internal control, which were in terms of failures for internal control, audit committees, external auditors. Those were the big 3 that I was picking up on. So what that means is that as far as tonight is concerned, what we're going to do is to focus on risk management as a topic. Of course, it will appear on any given examinations, quite likely that one of the choice section questions will be about risk as an issue. So as we did with the other areas, what I want to do is to just give us an overview, not of all of it, but an overview of what I think are the key topics that you need to be aware of, need to revise on. And also, of course, it sets the groundwork for the questions that I've selected as to why I've selected them tonight. So with risk, the way we did it is that we started off, quite unusually to start off with risk roles, but it seemed more appropriate to deal with that. What you know in relation to it is that it's essentially just about 2 things. So it's about the need for strategic risk management in terms of the risk committee, and then at the tactical level, it's about the role of a risk manager. Now, of course, I could tip them both because they're both very similar roles. However, the examiner has really overdone, to my taste, he's overdone the issue of risk committees and risk managers haven't been examined for a very long period of time. And I just think that he's going to change tack. I think he's going to go for it. This question will take us through a lot in terms of what risk managers do. Now, of course, risk management as a function involves two major tasks. So the first area is one of risk analysis. And so the first element in terms of understanding risk will be the need to identify what the risks are that the organisation is exposed to. Now, there's a lot of things that he can play around with and he can deal with in relation to that area. I mean, for instance, when we went through this, we talked about Turnbull's top 10 risks. Now, no one will ask you no one's going to say what are those 10 risks. That's not going to happen. But in examination questions, the examiner very often picks out one of the risks or some of the risks in terms of that list. Of course, the big two, the biggest one probably is market risk, to have some sense in relation to that. And the other one is reputational risk, because these are the ones that you can talk most about. That's why they're examined most often by the examiner. And so, you know, in a given exam, he may examine one of them. For instance, in the question we're about to do, health and safety risk is the issue that's identified. In the last exam, the examiner asked you what is technology risk. So he does do this, you know, he does pick them out and ask you to define these things. There are other issues that are in there. I mean, for instance, there is the distinction between strategic and operational risk. Now, I'm not tipping it because I write in red the tips, don't I? And that's not in red. However, it is one of those things, again, which is examined very often. So you'd want to have some familiarity with it. Next time, which is Friday, of course, when we do ethics, one of the questions that I select for Friday actually includes strategic and operational risks. So, you know, we'd be looking at that as an issue, or it will come around anyway. But not this evening. It's not as important, not as examinable, I think, as some of the other areas. There's also, of course, within that section, the need to think about risk correlation. But I really doubt whether you'll be asked anything about negative and positive correlation this time round, the relationship between risks. Do you remember? I don't think it's going to be there, but it has been included on a case study question within the last year or so, so I would be aware of it as a point. So I'm not really looking at that. I'm not really that keen on it as an issue. However, of course, the second aspect of risk is to talk about risk assessment or risk exposure, isn't it? How bad is the situation for the organisation? And in order to look at how bad it is, we might apply appropriate techniques, appropriate frameworks in relation to it. And also we need to think about a variety of different issues. So within the concept of what is risk assessment, one of the issues that's in there, and there are a number, but one of them is static and dynamic risk. And so actually I think that there will be something about risk assessment, and it might actually be that terminology. On the last examination paper, the examiner asked you for another piece of terminology that is associated with risk assessment. So on the last exam, he asked you to distinguish between objective and subjective risk. So it's a very similar kind of thing, isn't it? You know, objective and subjective, or static and dynamic, you know, very similar kind of thing to ask you about. So it won't be about objective and subjective, but I'm thinking maybe something in relation to that area relating to those issues. So again, one of the questions we're going to do tonight, we'll focus on that as a point as well. And of course, kind of at the end of it, it's about risk strategy, isn't it, for an organisation? Now, in any exam, there's always good news and bad news. Unfortunately for you, as far as the risk strategy is concerned, the examiner has just examined TARA, and it was in the case study last time. So the idea of you being asked about TARA this time round is very, very remote. I mean, obviously you know what it is as an issue, but I wouldn't be expecting it as a point. So if I had to think about, is there anything in that area of risk strategy that might be there as an issue, then actually it might be quite surprising. And I'm kind of going out on a limb here because it's only been examined once and we're about to see the question that it was examined in. However, I just think that it might be something in relation to ALARP, and my word, if there was a reason for